Hello there, everybody. It is Thursday, March 28th, 2019, and this is the MMA Beat. My name is Luke Thomas. I'm the host of this program. Thank you so much for watching. Obviously, I'm from MMA Fighting as well as SiriusXM. We are three deep today. You know this gentleman to my left from CBS Sports, the official combat sports check casher himself. Brian Campbell is here, and at the end, the Iceman, the man in the hat, Chuck Mindenhall. Boys, how are we?
Fired up. I got arm and leg room today. I like this.
It's very, very good. Yes, Danny Segura's out today, but he will be back, I think, next week. So have no fear. All right, so let's get to it. Not a moment to waste. A lot to get to. There's actually a UFC event this weekend, which you would not necessarily know.
A big one, too.
Yeah, I'm about to say, not even an insignificant one. And it's not even like, UFC Pluto. It's actually Philadelphia, which might as well be on Pluto because it's a place full of reprobates, but neither here nor there.
Wow.
Cheesesteaks overrated. Can't wait to see Bryce Harper get hit with batteries. That's all I'm saying.
Is that it?
In any event. So let's get to it now. All right. You got to start this show with Conor McGregor typically, and then especially on a week like this. Now, I know a lot of people have given takes already, and most folks know the story at this point. On Tuesday morning at around 1 a.m., he puts out a tweet unceremoniously saying he's retired from the sport. A lot of people don't really believe it, or they believe it halfway, or they're not sure what it means. Maybe he's feuding with management because he doesn't want to be in co-main event roles. Maybe he wants to share in the company. About 2:30 p.m. that same day, New York Times comes out and essentially confirms reports from Irish media that Conor McGregor has been arrested and accused and is being investigated for sexual assault, but he has not been charged with anything, and the investigation is ongoing. There's nothing new in that investigation, but it is, in fact, according to the New York Times, as well as Irish media, taking place. There's a lot of elements to this story. Brian, we'll just sort of start down the line. Jesus, man, what a huge story, right? And because there's so many different elements here. Some are sinister, some have nothing to do with that. Some involve the UFC, some don't. So when you think about what happened on Tuesday, How do you absorb this story?
I don't think the events are related. There's a cynical reaction to necessarily think, oh, you announced your retirement because you knew this story was coming out. To kind of defend McGregor in that sense, that story had been out there. Just his name hadn't officially been linked to it.
There is a difference there, though.
Because of European and Irish media laws, which is not trying to diminish the accusations. It's a whole separate thing. But I think it's a separate thing.
Okay.
McGregor's team came out with that statement. But if you notice something in that McGregor statement, that third final sentence really seemed to be taking a shot at the UFC.
Certainly did.
Which really leads me to believe that this entire thing is just another circus charade fire drill, similar to 2016, but different, obviously. There's no cheese this time around, and there's no fight scheduled. But I think it's something I've heard you give good takes on your radio show. I've given the same on my podcast, that this is a negotiation battle that comes down to the fact that Conor McGregor's brand in 2019 is not as strong as it was in 2016, only it doesn't have to do with the fact that he's coming off of a one-sided loss. It has to do more with the fact of the UFC's changing business structure and financial plans, where they desperately needed a star back in those days, where Conor's miraculous rise. And by the way, being a company man helps. Conor was the ultimate draw and the ultimate company man at the same time. It gave him power we'd never seen before. He still has power. He still should be in the main event every single time he fights or cracks open a bottle of whiskey. But with the money coming in from ESPN, he doesn't drive the ship anymore. And I felt this was Dana's way of showing him that, because why else would Dana come out right away and be like, you want to retire? I believe you. Go ahead. You had a great run. Thanks so much for your business.
Yeah, enjoy the whiskey. What do you think?
I mean, have you gotten any sense that this guy was near retirement? Now, he's kind of flirted with this idea because he can.
I got the exact opposite
Exactly.
sense.
Every single time there's been a fight night where there's a guy within his vicinity or weight class, including Anderson Silva, who's nowhere near that, he has flirted with those guys afterwards, like, hey, I'd love to fight you. Let's do this stuff. I'm not saying that. I know he operates big picture. He's very good at looking at big picture and really understanding how he's going to make the biggest waves possible. But I don't think it's a charade that he wants to get in there and fight some of these guys. You know what I mean? And I know the first time through, nobody believed him. 2016, nobody believed him. Everybody knew what was going on in that specific instance. This particular time, because he's even after his arrest in Miami, he's out there jogging. Why is he doing this stuff? It's like he's clearly kept himself in shape. He wants to fight. I just feel like this is a straight-up negotiation. Now, going to the other side of it, I kind of agree with you, but you do wonder, in the big picture sense, if there was some correlation in terms of his own damage control, and to kind of take one headline and
make there was?
For him, yeah, probably.
He's not stupid.
Yeah.
He's very smart. To me, it just seems like you're going to retire on the same day. that the biggest news publication in the world is going to talk about serious
Which
accusations.
legitimized all of that other stuff, by the way, right? Because it's like you're hearing the whisperings of everybody. We talked about a little bit about on this a few months back.
I want to
right?
talk about it just a second, yeah.
So, I mean, once it becomes the New York Times, obviously you have a whole different level of scrutiny, and it makes it very real for people. You know, that's the big, you know, I think you pointed out on Twitter, it's like it's the biggest global, you know, brand in the world for that. So it takes it up a notch for sure.
It's interesting, though. There's two sides to a conspiracy. I mean, we're speculating. We're trying to figure out what may or may not have happened. And there is one side to say, well, Conor may have floated that retirement to get ahead of the story, to make bigger headlines than what would come out. But I'm telling you, from that statement and the way it was written that his team put out, it almost made me think the flip side of the conspiracy is true, that he's almost accusing somebody else of floating that story to coincide with the timing of his retirement and a potential negotiation.
So you think someone may have, well, here's the thing. The story in the Times was filed from Dublin, and they had 4 sources there, allegedly. So who, you think someone there leaked it to him? Well, first of all, you can't really leak it because the story was out in Dublin, but I guess Irish media laws, even to this day, the Irish media, to their defense, have been quite silent because they don't want to get sued. They have very different laws there, so actually you have to give them a pass. They're they take it very seriously, as you can well imagine. But it was an open secret, so like, give me the inner workings of your theory here.
Well, my theory isn't necessarily a theory where I'm saying there's a conspiracy and the UFC floated this news to get back at Conor. I'm just saying I leaned more toward trying to sniff out that side of it than necessarily Conor leaking it, which would have been a smart PR move to get ahead of the news he knew was coming. Either way, and you can go back and forth, and we're just speculating, and it's all a bunch of crap, and I'll go back to eating my hot dogs at the gas station, and I get you, all you people that hate the side of it. But I hate that this is this easy for one person in 2019 to take over the media. Not that I'm lazy, although I did get woken up out of bed that morning with, hey, Conor McGregor may have retired. Can you jump on it right now?
Yeah, I got
but the fact that none of us actually believe at age 30 that he is close to retiring.
Right. I also tweeted this. It's like, I honestly, in MMA, sometimes I cannot tell the difference between fake news and news.
Right.
It is, they are synonymous.
Either way, it's our job to get the clicks. It's our job to open this show right now talking about Conor McGregor probably not retiring. Right. But one person in 2019 with the control of social media does have that control to snap their fingers. We all react. And that's why it's screaming public negotiation. It's screaming that right now when we already know the facts. He turned down the Cowboy fight as a co-main event. It seems like it all lines up.
I mean, he had like 500,000 likes and retweets or whatever within like the first 8 hours. And that was because it was in the wee hours of the night. You know what I'm saying? Like, he knows what he's doing. You know, you've been around newspapers a long time. You know, it's like, you know, if they're working on a story that's going to create waves, they're checking those sources. And in fact, if you look, I believe in the piece that came out in the New York Times, they basically, like, there's no comment from whatever. These things happen. Obviously, he knew the story was coming out. That's what I'm trying to say. His representation knew the story was coming out a full 24 hours before it comes out. So the day before. That's how newspapers work. They tell them, hey, we're running the story. We're going to give you the opportunity to make a comment. So just given all that, too, it's just something to consider that it wasn't like, I think some people might think he was just kind of, that it's, he might have been caught off guard by that or something like that. It's just not.
There's no way they were caught off guard. Here's what we know. There's no way they were caught off guard. That doesn't mean, to your point, that the retirement wasn't entirely related to. It could, in fact, be coincidental. There's just no way to really know. But it could be entirely related to any dispute that he has with UFC management.
And there's a lot of weird timing in this whole story because him sending that tweet out was what, like, an hour and a half after he was on the Jimmy Fallon show, which wasn't taped that night, obviously.
Right, it was taped a week earlier.
But in that show, which was a fun side of his personality, it was a fun little spot. It's a complete infomercial. Don't fool yourself. But it's a fun little spot, which he's doing karaoke or whatever. And he says, yeah, I'm probably going to be back in July. So,
and he was like, on March 23rd, I just looked at his timeline. He was, doing the same little dance routine with Anthony Pettis, who just had won his fight. So.
And also, it
just all adds up to he was right in the game up until the moment he wasn't.
I have to pull audio from my radio show all the time. I got 15 hours of radio a week to do. There was a bunch of Instagram clips of him at various St. Patrick's Day parties or events either in Chicago or Boston, talking to fans or the media, explicitly telling them, yeah, I'm probably going to come back in July, but we'll see. It's a crazy game. He didn't really firmly commit, but this was not like a guy who was like, yeah, I'm ready to hang him up. You never got that sense.
Here's a key part of this. Let's talk about this. When he came back from the Mayweather fight, and we started to say, okay, look, he's going to finally make his UFC return, but can Conor McGregor ever take a paycheck below $100 million again? He got a taste of that good life. Can he go back and sign on for 5 million plus pay-per-view points? And we were all like, I'm not sure. Then he fights Khabib. It obviously shatters MMA pay-per-view records, so there's no argument there. He was going to make his money anyway. Is this debate not so much about co-main and main and more about, because he's coming off of a loss, UFC maybe giving him a lowball offer in his terms?
So there's a few elements to the story. I want to unpack them piece by piece. Let's stick to them if we can. It's a great question. Let's get to the first part of it. Number one, I have seen people push back against me and against others saying, in good faith, these are not bad criticisms, that, look, the Irish media has been talking about this. Why is it news if the New York Times does? Here has been my argument. Quickly, I'd like to get you guys to weigh on it. It's not that I don't want to say that the Irish media didn't do their due diligence, but they are quite literally hamstrung, well, not literally, but they are hamstrung by laws where it's like, if someone comes to you and says, look at these media reports, and they don't name Conor McGregor anywhere, I'm not even sure that they name the UFC on certain ones, but I can't be certain about that. But they certainly do not name Conor McGregor.
Sportsman.
Right, sportsman, Irish celebrity. It's like, what do you want me to do with that? I don't know what that is.
Maybe Van Morrison for all we know.
And to the point, he was not charged. Here's what the New York Times did. Two things in my judgment. One, they put a name on it. And number two, you can just look this up. Now, there are wire services that potentially have a longer reach, but for any kind of major news reporting body worldwide, no one has the reach that the New York Times does. Right. It's not even close. So to me, it's like you got the old gray lady out there saying your name. Dude, that is different. I'm sorry, that just is different. I don't mean to besmirch the good work of Irish media, but it feels like a game changer for me.
I thought you worded it perfectly when you said that it changes visibility on his case. So that's the
case. The investigation, as far as we know, nothing's changed. But the visibility of the story overnight exploded. Anyone disagree with that?
No, I agree with that.
All right. So that brings us to the next part of the story. Let's put away. Folks have asked me, like, so what's your take on the accusations? I don't have one. He has
How could you?
He hasn't been charged with anything. It reminds me of Tyreek Hill. Now, Tyreek Hill has a bit of a sketchy past, but he's been accused of being involved in a situation, but he's not been charged with anything. I'm not even sure he's been a part of necessarily the investigation from a full-throated way. What do you want me to say about Tyreek Hill? I'll wait till there's more data. In the case of Miami, in the case of Brooklyn, he was charged with a crime. He's not been charged with a crime in Ireland, so I don't have a take right now.
Yeah, the only take you can make is that it's a bad timeline playing out.
Doesn't look great, but I don't know what to say beyond
you can obviously say you're not surprised to see things like this, and I'm not trying to put judgment on his character, but there has been many incidents, obviously, where his behavioral issues have gotten the better of him.
Sure.
So, I mean, you can just make a pattern.
But that does not imply that he committed any crime.
Of course.
I like it. I'm not surprised. Nice Nate Diaz.
Not surprised.
Okay. So there's that component. Until there's more information about it, that's the story, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. So that takes us to the second component, which you alluded to. Before we talk about the change in the dynamics of how the UFC makes money, which really is the crux of this issue, I saw people this week saying, like, oh, Conor's got the leverage. Ooh, you are confused.
Well, he still has the most leverage anyone's ever had.
He has the most leverage in a situation where fighters have almost no leverage.
Right.
All right, but that's a separate question. You raised something earlier, and something I've been thinking about too. On the one hand, to me, Chuck, Conor's celebrity, it's better than it's ever been in terms of his visibility. Sometimes for the good reasons, sometimes for bad, but it is highly visible. But that is different than his stock as a fighter. That, to me, has pretty clearly taken a dip. I think the UFC feels that. Agree or disagree?
No, I agree with you 100%. I mean, how could you not? I think ultimately that fight with Nurmagomedov was I give him all the credit in the world because that's a fight that I think looked horrible in prospect. You're like looking at it like, ooh, he's got every one of your weaknesses dialed in. He's going to do exactly what happened. But it was anticlimactic in the aftermath. And you can tell one thing that I can tell about this is just about every Conor McGregor fight. If he lost like the Nate did, there was a huge outcry for that rematch. They wanted to see it. Is there an outcry for this rematch? I don't think really anybody, besides him, there's no traction behind it for a rematch, which tells you everything you need to know about the one-sidedness. And then, of course, the moonlighting gig over there in boxing, I think, it turned him into more of something beyond just a fighter, obviously. It became like this novelty that was kind of floating through worlds, and all this stuff. And I feel like that didn't help either, but I 100% agree, just going back to your point. his fighter stock is that. We were talking about him at Mystic levels, like he was talking about Mystic Mac calling his shots and all this stuff. None of that's happening anymore. He's a really good fighter at this point that people want to see matched up, I guess, with somebody who's going to be a big fight. You're not even seeing some people don't even want to see him against the highest competitive guys. They just want to see him against Nate Diaz again, or you know what I mean? So it's clearly changed.
Yeah, I mean, he ran back that Nate Diaz fight from that first loss so quickly. There wasn't really time for him to give up the ghost of this guy who makes bold claims. But inactivity can be your worst enemy because in fight game, you're only as good as your last fight. You don't have a game every other night or a game every weekend. You fight twice a year, if that at times. He's been so inactive and then a loss that one-sided, man. It's why a couple weeks ago when he got arrested for the Miami thing, we're like, I don't know if he's the same guy on the inside because the same guy would be back, already have a fight date in April when he's going to get off suspension and be ready to go. Yeah. And inactivity can really bruise your fighter reputation.
I always thought, I was like, how was Mayweather able to do this? Where he just, so infrequent at times in his career. Here's the answer. Number one, boxing skill level is so sophisticated, but it's a narrower range of offensive weaponry. I think that's a fair argument to make. But also, he was just so much better than his peers. There was a time where Conor was better than a lot of his peers. I can't make that claim right now. At least not right now. I'm open to a change if he comes back and, wallop somebody. But right now it's like, dude, Mayweather could take time off because he was so far ahead of the game.
You look at guys like Max Holloway, who's just won every fight since their initial, Max Holloway was 21 years old. Who would you favor in that fight now? It's almost like, I feel like
Pretty clearly Max, yeah.
Which is it just tells you kind of how the times change. And a lot of that is due to the inactivity.
And the first fight wasn't close. He tore his ACL and McGregor just ran over him, Pretty crazy. All right, that takes us to the last component of the story. Then I want to get to all the other stuff because there actually is a lot of news to get to beyond just the Conor McGregor craziness. The last component of this is the story of the UFC. Now, when we were thinking about the big deal about the UFC signing with ESPN, there was a lot of different moving parts. By the way, here's an interesting feature. Maybe you know the answer to this. So Dana comes out in this video and says two things. One, all of our pay-per-views, are going to go on ESPN Plus unless it's bars or restaurants. And then two, by the way, we had a 5-year deal. Now we have a 2 more deal. So now we have a 7-year deal. To my knowledge, has anyone told us what the new value of the overall deal is?
No.
Right. So I find that kind of interesting. I wonder exactly what that number is. I don't know if they just prorated it or if it's just a function of the pay-per-views itself. I don't know. But that was kind of interesting to me. That caught my attention that no one has put out a value on that. But what they did put out value on, there's some estimates about it. The UFC gave all their pay-per-views to ESPN Plus. So now you have to become a subscriber. We all know the story there. What was the significance? When we thought about it in terms of fighters, it's like, well, how's that going to affect pay-per-view points and pay, and how much of a cut is UFC getting, and why are they doing this? And yes, some of the answers are streaming is the future. Okay, that's one part of it. You can understand why they would want to be in robust company with ESPN. But over the last 5 or so years, the UFC has been not pushing out pay-per-view, but finding as many guaranteed streams of revenue as they can. Annual money that they can count on by contract, often through television rights overseas. Now they have that domestically, and now it turns out, according to certain estimates, that the amount of licensing money that they're going to get from ESPN, not counting any gravy on top, just the bare minimum, would be something in the neighborhood of 500,000 pay-per-view buys per event.
Wow.
Do you understand how monumental that is? That they haven't done that in over a decade, and even then they couldn't do it that consistently. That is a shocking amount of money. Think about it, 64.
And a huge upgrade from the numbers they've been posting over the last.
Oh, not even close. You know what I mean? Not even close. And you ask how they can do it. Again, if they're cutting out all the middlemen, there might be ways where the buys can drop and they can still make more. So they're going to make more than that probably in the end. That's the minimum they're going to make. And then people have the audacity to say, well, Conor McGregor's got the leverage. Well, look, if the situation changes, Brian, where another fighter comes along and the UFC is under a lot of pressure to make that fight, Conor can call some shots, I think. But right now, what can you do to move them? I feel like the UFC kind of, they've been doing this for a while. It wasn't an automatic thing. But I think that after Mayweather and McGregor, they were like, you know what? If there's a chance to remove this kind of situation where, yes, they heavily profited from it, no doubt about it, but they kind of got, to borrow from Mel Gibson's movie, they got dragged over concrete a little bit like that in terms of the public perception. Am I overstating things?
No, because Here's the hidden thing on the no one wants to talk about Mayweather McGregor, but the hidden thing about it is there's a reason why blowhards like us spent that whole 9 months before the fight was announced going, this fight will never happen, you're idiotic. And it wasn't because an MMA guy couldn't beat the best boxer in this era in his first pro debut. It was because why the hell would Dana White or the UFC ever agree to let him do it? Ultimately, like you said, they saw the money involved and they saw if we don't let him, we might go down some kind of dark road here of a power struggle.
Yeah.
They did it. Because that was a perfect storm. When Conor came to power, I mentioned it, he had the ability, he had the marketing, but he was also a team player. Would take fights at the last minute. It came to the perfect storm of when they needed stars, when UFC needed stars to carry the brand. But what's the real legacy of Zuffa in their 15-year run? It was making that brand bigger than anybody in the organization. In fact, the face of UFC in the first decade with Zuffa was Dana White, not Chuck Liddell, not any one fighter. That changed when the leaks started happening, when you had to cut corners, when MMA started to look a little bit too much like boxing, and there's interim titles, and there's this and that. Suddenly, this comet, Brock Lesnar, comes in, and you're like, well, the most important thing is when he fights and those pay-per-views sell. And then you had Rousey, and then you had McGregor, and then you had, after that sell your soul territory, where we need stars so badly. Well, that is now changed. This deal, which gives them the leverage and the foundation that we can roll out a Nama Yunus Andrade pay-per-view main event, which, by the way, love that fight. Not going to sell, just like Nunes Pennington, record lows. But there's no pressure. There's no fear. The brand UFC is now bigger than anybody, and/or including Conor. And it's just bad timing for him that he's coming off a loss, and that his inactivity has allowed them to find a new way to not have to depend on him for the money.
Would there have been awareness or a mutiny within the ranks like there has been over the last few years if there was no Conor McGregor kind of pushing every precedent and changing every precedent? You know what I mean? Like, he basically changed the bar of everything that you could get by with, what you should demand, almost every element of it, including all the way up to where this thing stops, getting equity with the UFC, right? Yep. So you just look at that and you think, at some point, Dana White. I mean, he's the alpha. Like you said, he's the guy. So I think this whole time this has been going on, all of us talk about how Conor has kind of pushed them around and gotten by with so much stuff. You know that they're in the back room seething at this at some point, and they're going to have to put their foot down. Well, this is the perfect opportunity. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, because at this particular impasse, you got one guy like, hey, I'll quit, and you got the other guy going, see you later, which is kind of crazy.
Like, didn't blink for a second. Kevin Ollie reached out to him, gave him a statement. MMA Junkie gave him a statement. Like, there was no UFC has no comment at this time, or we'll have comment at a later date. No, oh yeah, bye, see you later.
Yeah. That was an old school gangster move right there.
Yeah,
that was a power move. And think about it. Conor pushed as far as he possibly could. He pushed up to the point of trying to get equity, of trying to let the inmates run the asylum, of getting to the point where I want the ring on my finger, Dana. And I feel like UFC and Dana probably would have come pretty close if Conor didn't walk away in 2016. Yeah. And look at how the times have changed that quickly.
Dana is kind of a rogue figure who's carved out the thing he has over this course of time. The only thing you think is, like, is he operating with the best interests of ESPN in mind when he's like, hey, see you later? Because you could say the new partnership over at ESPN has got to be looking at a little bit like, don't let him just run away. You know what I'm saying? They've got to want him to be there because of their new model and what they're purchasing. So I feel like this is Dana just kind of going off.
I have it on good authority that they wanted Conor on ESPN, the major channel. But
that would.
I don't know if that's going to happen.
But don't they have him over the coals? He did re-sign a long contract. While they helped the Mayweather fight happen because they benefited from it, I don't think Conor can just go, sorry, Dana, I'm fighting Paulie Malignaggi in that bare knuckle thing in a couple months in Wyoming. I don't think he can do that, right? I mean, eventually they're doing this power move so that he has to come back to them.
To Chuck's point, I mean, these guys can sit out, right? And that's a form of protest. And again, if something happens where there's this overwhelming market force to make Diaz McGregor 3, then maybe the UFC might have to make some concessions. Ownership, I don't think so, but maybe some other things. But short of that, you're going to need Congress, you're going to need a union, or you're going to need a lawsuit to get these guys any power. That window has been closed. Last thing on this, very, very quickly, because I want to move on. We spent almost half the show on this already. Does Conor deserve shares, Chuck, in the company? So it's a complicated question. What's your general sense?
I want to say yes, because I feel like he ratcheted it up to a whole nother level. But there were other people, obviously, Ronda Rousey being another major in Blockbuster. There have been other people who have helped raise his visibility and give him that kind of business. But when you look at when he's four pay-per-views out of the top 5, I could say yes, he might actually deserve some of the shares in that.
I say no. There's got to be a line between owners and employees. Didn't Magic Johnson have
He's
to
not an employee.
But didn't Magic Johnson give up his ownership stake to become the head coach of the Lakers at one point? Like, there's certain rules for a reason.
But the Lakers are an established institution. The UFC sold for $4 billion in no small part directly because of Conor McGregor. Others as well, but you cannot make the claim that they would have hit $4 billion without Conor McGregor.
All right, I don't think he needs stock, but does he need guaranteed Mayweather money of $30 million per appearance? No matter
if I was the UFC, here's how I'd split the difference. I would say, here's the deal: Conor McGregor holds the record for the all-time pay-per-view in this company. So if you hold the record for the all-time pay-per-view in this company, you can co-promote. So we'll give you that McGregor entertainment. We'll cut you a fighter check. We'll cut you a promoter check. And then that'd be the end of it. So fighters might say, well, what about me? Okay, break his record, and you can have one too. That's the way I would do it. That way he gets extra bunch of money. He looks like he's separate, but you can keep that demarcation line out there, yeah? All right, so let's jump to the next topic, because that's as much as I want to talk about Conor McGregor for today. Probably already too much. There was a bevy of fight announcements yesterday, like just a metric ton of them. Let's just jump right into it. Chuck, I'll start with you. John Jones is going to defend his light heavyweight title. It appears in July against Thiago Santos. Oh, wait. So he was out here flirting, sort of, with Stipe. Stipe gets on. He's like, I'll see you in July. I'm thinking, oh, man, it's a done deal. Right. I don't know how I feel about it, but okay. And then all of a sudden, Thiago Santos. Now, UFC hasn't announced it. Brett Okamoto of ESPN reported it. But let's assume that's true, okay? Right fight to make, wrong fight to make.
I mean, it's the right fight to make, but it was the timing of it sucked because of John Jones' kind of guess. The whole thing, the bottom line is he's sitting there revving people up into thinking this, he might go up to heavyweight and face Miocic, and you start to contemplate that. Your imagination starts to wrap your mind, around that, and you start to get a little excited about it. And then within hours they announced that fight. Now, if they just announced that fight and there's no flirtation whatsoever of the other thing, and once you get past that, of course I do like this fight, because I'm one of those guys who, when I was out in Vegas and watching Smith take him on, and you're thinking, we're kind of moving this thing along again. He's back. We finally have the clear guy at number one, who should have been the guy probably the whole way, with all those problems. He just beat one of the contenders. There's a couple of others lined up. Are they great contenders? We don't know. Probably not. Not in prospect. But you want to see him go through a couple of these guys, right? Like I do. I want to see the whole division get moving again. So I like it. I mean, Santos, since he came up and weight, has just been kind of hacking guys down. To me, I was like, I got kind of excited about it when I was contemplating before, when Dana mentioned the fight. So I'm fine with it. I think it's a good main event.
No, Chuck.
All right, why?
Hated it. Are you kidding me? This was the ultimate tease. I mean, when he's doing these Stipe things, I didn't just get excited. He put his hand into my field spot. I'm booking flights to Vegas, brother, for International Fight Week. Like, I'm catching the feels from this. This is what we want.
That's John Jones, though. It's like mostly John Jones.
It's John Jones' fault for teasing us, because this is what I've said last show. The UFC should do. They should send him to heavyweight challenges, big business, all that, to come back down in this. And nothing against Thiago, but it's where we're at in this 205 division. A lot of young, unproven guys who probably should get proven against each other, not taking L's against John Jones. Same argument as last time, but considering John Jones teased it and got you excited, this is vegetable lasagna.
I just don't understand.
Lasagna is the best food in the world. I'm telling you, I'm not trying to sound like Garfield here.
Not as good as pizza,
but you know what sucks? Pull the meat out of it and try to stick some veggies in there. That's what Thiago is.
Lasagna is pretty good.
And I think one thing, Brock Lesnar looks at Thiago and looks at his tattoo and says, man, I should have got that one, because his doesn't look like
the thing.
I just don't understand the strategy unless there was some kind of 11th hour switch. But I'm like, what's the strategy of actually planting that out there at all?
Yeah, that was weird. And then hours later, again, you never know when the UFC, because sometimes they'll, fights will be almost signed and then not actually signed, and they'll say it, or sometimes they'll just release somewhat fake news to pressure fighters. So you never really know exactly what was there. Here's the thing. I think it's the right fight to make. I think Brian just has a short attention span and the brain of a parakeet.
I was right about Brock's tattoo, though. I was right.
That part I wouldn't really fight you on. But I guess for me, when I'm looking at this, I'm thinking, of course, dude, look, if you just line up, here are the heavyweight contenders John could face, here are the light heavyweight contenders, like 9 out of 10 MMA fans are going to pick that. But it's almost like asking a kid, what do you want to eat? They're going to pick the ice cream and the cake every time. On some level, there is something to be said for having a few vegetables along the way. It's good for you. It's good for the overall body. And it makes the cake, when you get it.
I love it.
Well, I'm trying to, it's like the same thing with news organizations. People always say, look, let's look at the traffic and then let's just give folks what they want. Is that the best way to give people news? I actually don't think that it is. It actually ends up rewarding all of their basest impulses rather than a full-throated way to cover the anything, and no matter what your beat is. And so, look, if he stays there for like another 2 years, I'm going to lose my mind. But you beat him, you beat maybe one more guy, and then go up to heavyweight and do what you're going to do. By the way, it's Stipe's whole bit about sitting out and then, well, now I'm not going to sit out because I'll fight John Jones. You know, I get it, and if you beat John, it puts you right back in the spot, but it's a little bit like, well, what happened to the DC rematch, you know?
Stipe's becoming this bridesmaid. Like, remember when Khabib got played ahead of 205? Like, he's becoming that. I just find it
but hold on, you don't think they're offering him fights? Really? They have to offer him 3 fights a year. He decided to sit out. Here's my thought.
He wants what he feels he deserves.
Okay, but my thought with Stipe is, okay, I don't know when Cormier is coming back at this point, and when he does, you got to contend with all this stuff.
He's coming back against Brock in July, whatever.
Probably. But the point being is, beat somebody else in that division, and it puts you right back at the front. It's like, yes, if you beat John, does that probably guarantee you a rematch? Probably. Here's the problem. It's hard to do. It's hard to beat John. Beat someone else who you in that division, and you might be in a similar kind of position.
I just find it weird right now. When we just talked about Conor coming to power at a time when the fighters brand of the top 2 or 3 fighters was actually bigger than the brand of the UFC, right? Like Rousey, Lesnar, McGregor. John kind of almost started that in 2012 when he decided not to fight Chael on last minute, and they canned 152, and he pulled kind of a Randy Couture move that said, what was it? 151. Yeah. And now John's like ultimate company man because he needs to be. Now he's fighting every 3 months on the dot. Now he's trying to get in there.
I think he feels like he owes it to the fans and to the sport, whether it's true or not.
But guess what?
He feels that way.
He got humbled to a point where he had to come back, and he needed it more than the company needed him.
Yeah.
We have to wait until Conor needs the UFC more than they need him to see him again.
Yeah, maybe so. All right, so here's some other fights. Let's get to them. Amanda Nunes, I believe, on that same card, is going to be fighting Holly Holm. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a bantamweight fight, yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. All right, so she's going to go back down to her normal weight class. Now, folks have said, why is Holly in this fight? Oh, my God, she's not the most deserving. Okay, she's not. Look, let's be clear about it. She's not the most deserving, not by any real measurement of metrics. But it's like, it's one thing for example.
Well, tell those people to shut up. She's well deserving in this spot.
Well, hold on. Here's the thing. I've made this point before. I was a skeptic of 165 in the men's side. And you heard Dana this week on My Mom's Basement podcast. Shouts to Robbie from Barstool. But on it, he was like, you would just end up draining 2 divisions. And I thought that too until I did a mock draft. And I found out that's really not true at all. It's not nearly what you think it would be. And folks have said, well, what about women's flyweight? It's not that great. It's between the 2 best women's divisions. But the women's divisions are so not filled out. It's not the same comparison as the sweet spot of men's MMA in terms of the quality and the number of competitors. So my point being is this. It's like, yes, John should fight these other contenders. You should make an argument for it, and the best one should get it, and blah, blah, blah. But on some level, the women's divisions, man, you got to kind of play with the rules a little bit. You got to fudge them here or there. And it's like, you know,
dude, the women's divisions have never had depth outside of strawweight ever. This is a hard truth you got to face. Even when Ronda was rolling through it.
So you're okay with it?
I'm more than okay with it. You know what I wasn't okay with? Holly getting the title shot at featherweight, coming off of a defeat when it was obvious they created that division for Cyborg and she wasn't ready, and they panicked at 208 and rushed that off of Jermaine Durandamy fight. Now, Holly Holm didn't win it. That's her fault. But here's the deal.
Close.
She's a legend. Yeah. She's coming off a win at Bantamweight. And when you're looking at Amanda Nunes' career, there's a reason why suddenly Mandy is going, I may retire. I might fight once or twice more and retire because she's got the best record in women's history from a resume standpoint. And the only one she hasn't beaten of a current or former champion that's even remotely near her weight class is Holly Holm. And Holly Holm is a fantastic B-side for her from a name-selling pay-per-view type of thing and a co-main here. And by the way, Holly's still really good. Yeah, you can give me her UFC record is this, and she's
I actually think she's better than ever.
She's lost this amount and this many fights. All of her losses, except for that bad random one, have been very elite against Shevchenko, against Tate, in fights that she was winning and all that. And you just look at it, she hasn't gotten worse. She's actually improved with age. She's 37. She signed a 6-fight deal. She's going to wear a title again before it's all said and done. And a lot of that is with these diluted divisions. But I don't know if she's going to beat Amanda. But I think she's a live dog, and I think she's going to wear a title again. And I think she'll end up fighting longer than Nunes will.
There you go, all in. You?
I mean, I like it as well. At first, I was a little bit like, why is Holly Holm getting? But you think about it, and I'm like, who else are you going to put in there that's going to even draw something like that? I think that Amanda Nunes, having beaten Rousey too, like this is again the 2 Rousey killers kind of going at each other. They've never fought each other. I'm not sure where you could plug them in together down the line. I mean, this kind of makes the most sense right now if you want to see this fight. And I always get a feeling that the UFC really likes Holly Holm, that they want to put her in positions where, because she's a big, she's been in plenty of big fights.
6-fight deal.
Yeah, of course. And I think they want to see her in big positions. She's had some bad luck in some of her fights. She's been winning, like you mentioned, some of her fights, and for whatever reason, lost late. So I feel like you could put asterisks on just about anybody, but I'm like, for her asterisk to me, especially that Durandamy fight, I'm like, they strike me a little bit more. So I give her a little more leeway in terms of like giving her that chance. But I just like it stylistically, and I think that Holly Holm, it's crazy. As crazy as her record has been over the last 6 fights or whatever it is, losing like 4 of those. I can see a situation where she gives Amanda Nunes anything she wants in that cage.
And you can't do MMA math. You can't say, well, Holm lost to
Yeah.
Shevchenko and Nunes beat, and Holm lost to Cyborg who Nunes blown away. It's all about styles, and I think she's the perfect
Yeah.
style to counteract what Amanda does.
I will say that among all the active styles, Holmes is an interesting test for her,
Yeah.
and vice versa. Actually, of course, 2 great strikers, but 2 very different ones. One's a
I
very
like that on the same. It's on the same card, right, with Jones.
Yeah.
Because I like that as the 1-2 punch. I like when they do that. They have a couple of. They're not blockbuster style main event and co-main, but they're put together. They make like a big event. You know.
We saw, correct me if I'm wrong. That's probably for International Fight Week. I don't know that they've made that official, but that seems that way.
Yeah.
A little surprised on those ones. Usually,
Yeah,
for International
yeah.
Fight Week, they have like.
I'm very surprised because it's look to be honest, John Jones.
The last International Fight
International.
Week was the champ fight. It was
Right.
Stipe versus Cormier.
Yeah. John Jones, Anthony Smith, even though that 235 card was deep, didn't move me as a main event. And Thiago doesn't.
It did
move me
so
as a
well,
main
though.
event. It did, but like, look, the hardcore fans fight is the women's fight in the co-main event. But you can't find me a person that's going to be moved by Joan Santos. You're just not.
All right. Well, there's that one. Here's another interesting one. Tyron Woodley is going to be back in action in June for a fight night in Minneapolis. So the way this works is he's going to be fighting Robbie Lawler for the second time. You'll recall back in Atlanta, however many years ago, he knocked out Robbie in the first round to claim the welterweight title. It was not a very competitive fight, but things have changed. Robbie's back. You can say what you want about the Askren fight. They went in a different direction. Chuck, I'll start with you on this one. Do you like this move for both competitors?
It felt very left field. I did not even anticipate this because of the Askren. You know, I thought they would really try that avenue. Maybe they just couldn't get that worked out. But ultimately, given the way both those guys just fought, they fought on the same night, timing-wise, they're both okay. And, you know, I honestly did not feel like we saw the best Robbie Lawler the first fight, obviously. So I kind of was like, given Robbie Lawler, especially the way he handled himself against Askren, just everything, I was like, that seems like a very nice gesture in a weird way to give him a guy who's just the champion. You know, it's kind of like his chance to go and vindicate himself. I thought that was the right move by the UFC to give him that fight. And I love the fact that Woodley didn't. You know, he gets a lot of crap for not taking guys, you know, that people want, that the UFC wants him to face. What's the incentive for him, you know, to go beat the same guy again in a non-title fight? So hats off to him for doing that, man. I think it's, I think it's a more compelling fight than it would have been, say, last year. I think you go a year removed from that, and it's like it becomes something for me.
Oh, it's perfect matchmaking. Yeah. I mean, look, this is a sexy fight. I mean, if Ricky Martin could provide a soundtrack, it would be He Bangs squared, because you're going to see action. You're going to see action in this. Tyron Woodley, is he the same guy at 36? We don't know. Lawler just looked great at 37, and I think the hidden secret on Lawler losing in the first round at 201 in 2016
he looked devastating,
was
though.
running high and hard in one battle after another. Look, this is an ESPN main event with 2 big names, former champions. Really perfect matchmaking. The division's suddenly deep, and how do you make a leap back up into the title picture?
100%.
You beat a former champion on a main event.
I mean, Woodley, we weren't sure if he might even make the leap, you know, go up a weight class. We weren't sure what he was going to do. So I think this is cool that he's actually saying, no, not yet. I'm not done with this division, and I'll go through this guy if I have to get back where I'm going.
But for me, it's like Robbie, I don't know how far away from a title shot is. He's just always kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
But for Tyron, it's like under normal circumstances, if you beat Robbie, especially if you do it like in devastating fashion again, you would think, man, he's right back up in there. But like with, you know, the bad blood that there was there for, not at the end of his title run, but for the early and mid portions of it, I don't know. It seems like he's probably going to get a few of those wins before
It's a quasi-old guy fight. This is good. And if Robbie wins, we get a trilogy in another year, you know?
Yeah, I guess so. But I do think,
In Bellator,
I don't think
sorry.
it's a title shot guarantee by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think
No, not a title shot.
the
You
loser
have to
gets
win
pushed
another.
out of the title picture pretty hardcore at that point. But by the way, any part of you guys sad that they didn't go with the Askren rematch for Lawler?
No, because I think this is a better fight for Robbie. It's redemption. It's a main event. It's on ESPN. And like we're mentioning, you can circumvent and get right to the top again. Not a title shot if he wins, but he'll be right back there in a #1 title contender match.
Ultimately, that was the only guy in the equation that you wanted to see get it. Because obviously, Askren, why would you, you know, if you're an Askren fan, you're like, well, he got by him. You don't want to go. You don't want to deal with that again. But Robbie Lawler was the guy that I felt bad for you. Like, he kind of deserves it. He's been a guy around who's, you know, this whole thing is controversial. Maybe they run that back. If he's happy with this new event, and he gets all the things you just mentioned, I'm happy for him. And I'd love to see then Askren face, you know, like Masvidal or somebody else, like, to kind of keep him rolling.
Yeah, well, it's
in
smart
another area.
matchmaking by UFC because
And Askren's out there chirping,
Oh, yeah, he
too.
is.
And UFC doesn't want to run back a Lawler rematch for Askren. It would just sort of take time away, and he could potentially take a loss. Askren's brand is even hotter from the way that fight played out.
I think they've realized that. They had to have realized that.
Yeah. Oh, I think they realize it now.
I mean, look, we criticize them when they do dirty stuff. This is one of those smart dirty moves.
Yeah.
All right, very good. A couple more of these announcements. Another one, smaller side of things. We'll talk about the Bantamweight title picture in just a second. Shane Burgos taking on Cub Swanson. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on this other than to say this is a bit of a do-or-die fight for Cub Swanson. I think he probably knows it. You know, he's had a great run in the UFC. Bit of a trouble recently. I think his last loss was to Renato Moicano, but it was quick. It was inside of a round. Boy, Burgos he's a hittable guy, but he's a tough customer too, and he's
running hot
two
too.
action fighters, man. That one is going to be very interesting. Any thoughts on that?
I love that kind of matchmaking, to be honest. I like the guy who's the veteran who still has clout to his name, so that the guy coming up who people have seen but probably don't know that much about yet, this guy from the Bronx. And we've seen him, I know we see him because we're at these events and we pay attention. I don't know how much the casual fan knows who he is yet, but we know how good he is. So you know that this guy on his rise is facing this guy who is in desperation mode. And I always love those kind of collisions because either this guy is going to knock off the up-and-comer and be right back into it, or that guy is going to take his spot in the pecking order.
Or take his soul.
Possibly.
Yeah. Does he have the same tats as Mark McGrath from Sugar Ray?
Jesus, I don't know.
Who
Who listens to Sugar Ray?
Sorry, stuck in the 90s.
All right. Any thoughts on it very quiquely?
It's going to bang. I'm ready for it. Look, Burgos is riding hot. We'd seen him lose before, but he seems to be recharged and ready right now.
That Calvin Kattar fight, I just remember how many shots he took. Burgos, he took so many shots. He was just getting tuned up the whole time. And you could imagine a scenario, Cub Swanson liking his boxing skills, where he might be able to duplicate something like that too.
All right, and last but certainly not least, I want to spend a little bit more time on this one. Your Bantamweight title fight in Chicago, it appears, is going to be the most deserving person who should be in that opportunity, which is Marlon Moraes. Okay, of that there can be no debate. But then who he should face, there should be some debate about. Now, I thought it should have been Aljamain Sterling, but I could recognize an argument for Pedro Munoz. What I can't recognize is an argument for Henry Cejudo, which isn't to say that the fight will suck. This isn't to say that Henry won't necessarily win. But the question is, why are we doing it? Brian, why are we doing it?
This sucks. This decision sucks, okay? And it mostly sucks for the flyweights. I've said this before. UFC's got a piss or get off the throne type of deal on a couple of these decision makings, like when's Brock coming back, what's the situation, and what are we doing with the flyweights in this case? I think there's a flyweight matchup to make that makes a ton of sense, and it's Cejudo against Benavidez, who's deserving and defeated him in one of the fights of the year a couple years back.
Or Benavidez, man.
If you're not going to keep this division, Dana White, you need to announce that now. And if you are not, okay, what can you say about Cejudo getting a title shot? He just knocked out the Bantamweight champion who was forced to give up his title in TJ Dillashaw, I know, at a lower weight class. He's a star, meaning Cejudo, he's a rising star. So if you're getting rid of that division, I'm completely fine with it. But it leads me to believe, because they haven't announced it, that they're going to hedge. If Cejudo should lose, no big deal. He's still the flyweight champion. And if he should win, maybe we'll can it, maybe not. And I really don't like that at all, because I think there's enough names. There's a couple at flyweight for Cejudo where that's a better spot for him right now to become a champion. And then maybe you close down shop in flyweight in another year when he runs through those 2 or 3 names. And then you put him in there against who's coming out of Bantamweight. The sneaky thing about Bantamweight right now is there's enough names that are either deserving or up and coming, and a Peter Yan, where you could make a tournament. And they're not going to make a tournament, and we know that. Yeah. They're not going to come out with a Bellator Grand Prix redo, but there's enough names where I don't necessarily love Cejudo jumping that line if it's a potential setup for him to be a 2-division champion. He hasn't earned that, you know?
And also the mess it creates.
We talk about all this stuff, though, as if the paradigm is the same. And I agree with you guys 100%. I think that, what are they doing to flyweight? What are they doing? But I feel like these things just don't matter to them anymore or something. Like this flyweight thing, has it really been addressed? It's been sort of like, he's not being disputed that it's going to stay around forever. It's not really being shut down. You know what I mean? There's no real idea. It's just kind of like, the greater thing that we can do right now is, let's go with let's remain hell-bent on putting Cejudo at 135 for his next fight. They thought it was going to be against Dillashaw, kind of rematch up there. It's not, well, who can we get? You can almost see their line of thinking, but it's to feed one need, they just completely block out another. Joseph Benavidez, all the guys who are still in division, which aren't that many anymore, but all those guys, what becomes of them? That's what I can't stand. But I feel like there is a paradigm shift. I wish there would be more, it'd be a little more telegraphed as to what they're thinking in the future, because we are used to a paradigm where you could always, look at a fight and say, well, this means this to this, and this means this to this. We're at a situation now where we have no idea what a fight means at stakes. We have no idea if it means, flyweight is still on the line. Is he going back to flyweight? What does it mean? We have no idea anymore. And I think that's really frustrating. Yeah. So it's like, it's frustration that I feel when I see like that.
I got a hard truth to share with you, all right?
Although I do love the fight. I do love the fight.
Two hard truths to share. One, your beard's a lot more brown than salt and pepper in person. I never really noticed that. And two, the flyweight division failed because Demetrius Johnson was never sexy, and that's not really an insult. He is who he is. He's great and he's legendary, but
he's Mike Trout.
He was the face of the division for so long, and guess what? The division never took off. But I don't think the division is the problem. And instead, Henry Cejudo, Mexican-American, good-looking dude, tried to shoot a shot with the bellows and came up empty. This guy's a guy you can sell, whether he's at bantamweight or flyweight. So why not sell him at flyweight? You've got who you've got. Look, I mean, give me a soft, subtle mix, but if it ain't broke, then don't try to fix it. Flyweight still works. Plug the guy in, right?
So who should be fighting Marlon Moraes?
Munoz, if you want to reward him. I wouldn't be against Aljamain. I mean, certainly
after
it's
that
a
celebration, though? At the celebration, I'm just kidding.
It was tough timing for Asunciao, who was really, you could argue, was the most deserving in the division, and then suffered that loss to Moraes. But, hey, if they even did a trilogy with those two, I wouldn't hate it.
What do you think? Who should be fighting Moraes?
I mean, ultimately, Aljamain.
Yeah, I think it's an easy call. It should be Sterling. Yeah. He's the guy. Everyone's like, he got waxed in the first fight. Okay, he did. He went. True. But he's been on a 3-fight win streak since then and has looked way better. Now, maybe Marlon still wins. I don't know. I think Marlon's one of the best fighters in MMA. Maybe he wins. Maybe Marlon beats all these guys. But the point being is, put the deserving people in the positions they're supposed to be in. Aljamain Sterling has been slaving away at bantamweight. Reward that, man. Make that. And also, Juicy Formiga. Just be Devison Figueiredo. People are like, who's Devison Figueiredo? Exactly I'm sorry, you mean the undefeated flyweight?
Yeah.
And then Juicy Formiga beat him? Well, he should be fighting for one. Or Joseph Benavidez. It's like...
When's Dom Cruz coming back? We got time.
I don't know, man. I don't know. So all I'm just sort of pointing out, it's like, dude, there's a lot of ways. Again, not always cake. You got to have some vegetables, too.
I will say, if Henry Cejudo is able to... If Henry Cejudo goes in there and beats Marlon Moraes, and he does it in any kind of emphatic fashion...
Which, by the way, can happen.
Be one of the craziest runs...
Yeah.
In UFC history, Demetrius Johnson, T.J. Dillashaw, who are putting up in the pound-for-pound discussion, and now the guy who's like nobody really wants to face because he's just waxing everybody. It's just like to beat those three guys in succession and win 2 titles in that span that's historic.
Hey, you're the drug guy. You take drugs. You know a lot about them. Can you answer me in 30 seconds? Why is T.J. allowed to be suspended by New York, but we're not allowed to find out what he tested positive for?
Why would you be allowed?
This is confusing me. I'm sorry, I'm lost.
Different states just have different rules. Some states allow it, some states don't. It's simple as that.
I don't think John Jones would have given up the title in that spot. I think they would have tried to wait and figure it
out. Yeah, also this whole argument about like, oh, he gave up the belt, that must mean he's guilty. It's like...
No. He's...
It's like, who are these people that think that? I mean, how can you think so? It doesn't... I can't say that that's not true. That is one possible explanation.
If TJ was a company guy and wasn't union, would he still have the belt?
There's a million explanations for why he could have given up the belt that have nothing to do with an admission of guilt. It's like, oh my God, people, please be serious. All right, different story.
I meant powerlifting drugs when I was talking to you. Thank you.
I don't do that stuff anymore.
Okay.
Not the drugs or the powerlifting. It's too hard on my body. All right, so, God, you got me off on a whole tangent on this whole drug thing, but I'll leave it alone because people have decided that they want to lose the war on drugs, doping style, before they recognize that this is not a thing they can win. Okay, separate. There is a UFC event this weekend. I alluded to it at the beginning of the show.
Is that the one event?
It is UFC Ragnarok. No, it is UFC Philadelphia. It is the land where people celebrate the Super Bowl by eating feces off the street. That is who Philadelphia is. So enjoy that, Bryce Harper, you loser. All right. In any event, Mike Trout's better anyway. 18 days, this D-bag held the record for the biggest contract in sports. And then Mike Trout came in there and went, dunking on him, son. It was awesome. All right.
What about Canelo?
Canelo could end up making more, but in guaranteed money. Oh, actually, that was the funny part. People were like, Bryce's contract is so big. I'm like, Canelo's is bigger. Yeah. But Trout having guaranteed 430 is a lot.
Size matters.
That's a lot. All right. But there is a crazy main event at the top of this card. So, Justin Gaethje is fighting Edson Barboza. Now, in other worlds where Conor McGregor is not in the news like this, everyone would be pumped. And I think that they are pumped for it. So, Brian, let's start with you on this one. You think about Gaethje, you think about Barboza. We're talking about action here. What are the stakes, though? What's involved in this winning and losing process?
CTE, blood, guts. This is Mystery Violence Theater 3000, and I'm ready to get a part of this. Look, I love when ESPN's Brett Okamoto asked Gaethje, you can still wrestle, you know. It's actually legal. You're allowed to take a guy down. Will you do it? Have you thought about it? He's like, I've thought about it. But no, he's not going to do that because he bangs and this other guy does too. And they're going to kick each other in the leg really hard. And this division is kill or be killed, and they're ready for it. And I can't wait. Did you want me to actually answer something? I'm just selling the fight.
Yeah, is there anything else besides that on the line here?
Oh, another step forward in the most crowded division that has a big blockage on the top of it. But yeah.
So are we just, is like Trevor Whitman, for instance, just blowing smoke up everybody's butts about, you know, strategy and like kind of perseverance now? I feel like we've turned a slight corner with Gaethje. I don't know if you could see it 100% in the Vic fight. I don't know if you could draw too many conclusions. But ultimately, when you talk to him a little bit, he's thinking about the things maybe a little bit more that you just mentioned off the top of that tirade there. I think he doesn't really want to have CT and all those things.
You can't change him, though.
But that is true. I'm just saying, like, do we think that, because one of the compelling things is maybe we do see a more strategic guy in there, which is the craziest catch-22, because it would be the most disappointing thing that could happen against a guy like Barboza, where you want it to be kind of like that.
Imagine it's a wrestling
match. I know, that's what I'm saying. But we might actually see that, which is part of the drama.
The Vic win saved his career on the elite level, but I don't think it changed him as a person. I mean, if you believe that, it's going to be a bittersweet symphony for you, because this guy can't change, he can't change. But the thing, let's not miss here, all right? You ready about this? Barboza proved something against Nurmagomedov. What did he prove? They could take a ridiculous beating for 3 rounds that was really unnecessary late in the third?
Partly.
I feel like he's turned a corner from that fight. And I feel like...
Well, remember, it was the Kevin Lee fight, looked pretty similar.
He was on the way to winning that one. He almost stopped him, and some referees may have stopped that. But here's my
he was on the way to winning
Here's
it, really.
my overall point. I don't care what you think of Justin Gaethje or how quickly he can get washed, because his style is so immersive and aggressive. He's going to test your backbone and take you not only to the deep end of the pool, he's going to take you down to hell in that back room and open it up and make you go in there and sweat it out a while. Yeah. And I think Barboza proved against Khabib, where we were like, why is Barboza still taking this beatdown in this one-sided match? Maybe you should throw in the towel. I think that was the sweat locker. I think that was where he proved it. And I think he's the right guy to outlast and take down Gaethje in the same style we saw Eddie Alvarez and Dustin Poirier do.
Here's the thing. A lot of guys have the style to beat Justin Gaethje, but the problem is Justin Gaethje is this... Right. Dude, he is a barbarian coming over the hill with the axe. And it's like, that guy is the one who's going to die first until you just see him swinging through bodies, chopping them in half. That is who he is. So it's like, I agree with you.
Usually after he gets hurt. Too.
Yeah.
He gets hurt and then he does that.
I would look at this and I'd be like, well, Barboza's got he's got the much better footwork. He's got a good jab. As you mentioned, he's athletic, he's quick, he's got a vicious leg kick. If he's active and he's the one who's striking first, well, it's a bad matchup for Justin Gaethje. But then you're like, yeah, but Justin Gaethje.
Right.
You know, he just does things that you just can't imagine.
But because of his style, he can never get better. Every fight's going to take him closer to being... Remember Ruslan Provodnikov in boxing? The Russian who put his head down and
Timothy Bradley
would walk right into oncoming traffic and almost broke Bradley's will, and it was one of the greatest fights of the... Well, guess what? He stopped fighting at like age 29. I mean, like, you cannot keep that up.
Okay, but his last fight against Vic, he took virtually no damage. Like,
right, which saved his career, but I don't think it showed us enough that he's a changed man.
I see.
Did you remember the Ferguson-Barboza fight, which was a crazy butcher's fest?
Yes.
And I felt like you take the craziest element of both those guys and you think about that fight, what could happen on Saturday night, and it could be like a fight of the year. I mean, I hate using that hyperbole, but that's the capability. That is certainly something that could happen in this fight, because neither guy really, they can both take the pounding.
Yeah.
And they can both dish it out. They both get dangerous after they get hurt. They always have these moments where they go for broke. Like, they have very similar survival instincts, which is to say they put all that self-preservation behind them at some point in a fight, which is fun for fans and probably not good for longevity for these guys. Yeah. But you can see all of that in this particular fight, which makes it fascinating, man.
Don't forget Barboza, by the way, in the toughest division in the entire sport, has the best resume going back over 9 fights of people he's fought. I know he hasn't won them all, but it's all killer. And he's been competitive against everybody but Khabib.
And don't forget, he had a nice rebound win against Dan Hooker coming into this contest, which you really needed.
Which means a lot.
Well, the only thing I would say about this is the last thing for me, it's like when I think about these two matching up, Edson Barboza is like the guy you get when you can train a fighter to obey all the rules of combat. Like, we're going to make sure you have great footwork and a great athlete and a great jab, and you're going to breathe the right way, and you're going to strategize the right way. And then Justin Gaethje's the guy who shows you how good you can be when you break all those rules. I'm just going to run right into you, and it's like
a very Tasmanian devil. That's
an oversimplification, but there is something to that.
The very first time I ever visited him, I was in Colorado. He's in Colorado, that's where I was from, and I visited him at Whitman's gym there.
Was it Grudge?
It was, yes, Grudge. Yeah. This is right when they opened their facility, the new place. And I was in there, and he was training for a World Series of Fighting fight, and he was going through sparring partners, one after the other for the round lengths. And somebody came in, I forget who it was, but they're like, all right, he's supposed to be going a little bit at half speed, obviously. And immediately, bam, 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 and the dude's face was cut open, and he's like, oh, man, I'm sorry. And he throws down his gloves. It's like he can't control himself. Yeah. He just can't control that. It's like he's that guy who's, his energy level is bursting through the seams, and you can't rein it in. And once he gets in there and he starts trading the punches and he actually tastes his own blood, I feel like he's one of those guys. That's when he becomes dangerous.
Actually, this is why I think having someone like Trevor Whitman in his corner is actually very helpful, because Trevor probably knows, look, man, this is a feral animal. There's not much I can do to, and I mean as a compliment.
I think he does.
And so you need someone like that to be like, kind of just steer, just kind of corral a little bit and have him work in a wide space, because on some level he's just going to do what he wants to do. Right. So having a smart, observant guy like that's probably.
And every time you sleep on him, like he loses those couple fights in a row, and then he goes and beats James Vick. I mean, in the way he did. So it's unpredictable.
Gun to your head, Conor versus Gaethje tomorrow. Who wins?
Jesus.
I can imagine.
No wrestling with Gaethje, right?
No wrestling.
God, I don't know.
Conor's got to light him up, but then Conor might gas out trying to keep that.
That's the problem. It's like Conor's so potent in that first round. The obvious answer is if Conor can't put him out, Gaethje's going to maul.
No, Conor's got to still prove he has power. He had no power against Habib and no power against Floyd. I'm just saying.
Floyd's different, but
I know Habib took the air out of the balloon quickly, but
I don't know. I'd probably say Gaethje, but I honestly don't know. I don't know, because even Michael Johnson dropped him a couple times, and they had a 2-round fight. It's like, ugh. You have to imagine Conor's going to find that, So
Todd Grisham on the call. Great call from the.
Hey, shouts to Todd Grisham.
Thank you.
He's speculating about a retired fighter anyway. It doesn't matter.
I see that.
Wow.
All right, time now. We have a bunch of stuff for after the beat, including some of the stuff we didn't get to today, like the one championship fight over the weekend. But time now for Under the Radar. There's been a million stories this week that folks just did not pay attention to because they had no time. So we'll start at that end of the table, as we usually do. Chuck Mindenhall, what is Under the Radar?
Well, I thought it was interesting that, Cain Velasquez held the press conference in Mexico City, that he's going to go into this pro wrestling. And so you see something like that and you're like, wow, very quietly, one of the most dominant guys we've had in this game, a guy who we were calling the best heavyweight of all time, is just kind of tiptoeing out of the fight game a little bit. And I thought it's just kind of crazy to contemplate that this is kind of his exit. I think it's his outro, probably, given the loss and everything where he's at. I think this might be it for him. But just very strange. What a weird and quiet way to kind of go out in the
and he's going to have a real match. This isn't I'm just going to come show up in a mask.
Yeah.
It's a company called AAA,
right?
In Mexico. They have a Triple Mania. They call it. It's their version of WrestleMania. It's kind of a big deal in the wrestling.
Yeah.
Wait, they call it Triple Mania?
Yeah.
Like Triple Mania?
I don't know.
What's the organization?
AAA.
That's the name?
AAA,
yeah.
Okay.
The name of the company is AAA. The name of the event is Triple Mania.
Okay, I didn't know that. All right. Are they big or?
In Mexico, yeah. They're the WWE of Mexico.
So they're like on big TV networks
and
stuff.
Yeah,
right,
and look,
Makes sense for him.
He had a not a tryout, but he went to the WWE Performance Center last year. I'm sure you saw the pictures.
Yeah.
And he went through the motions. He worked out with the trainers. Yeah. He loved it. He's told people in interviews that he really considered it. I think the inside thing are telling me that they didn't really love him. Doesn't have a great personality,
No, he does not. But he is interesting character.
He's an advocate, that's all.
Yeah, all right.
Paul Heyman? All right.
All right, there, sir. What's under the radar?
Speaking of pro wrestling, Ronda Rousey. No, just kidding. She will be in the main event, though, Mania.
I don't care.
All right. My under the radar is Uriah Faber, 39 years old, UFC Hall of Famer, on the Ariel Helwani ESPN show, and says, yeah, he's doing those grappling, Polaris, all that stuff.
He's going up against Nikki Ryan.
Really
by the way, Nikki Ryan's going to win, just so everybody
knows. By the way, weird grappling tournaments is your gas station hot dog. It really is.
Guilty as charged.
And he wants to come back to the UFC, which is why the UFC Hall of Fame, which is a joke. What I hate the most is that they induct a guy like the day after his last fight. Like Bisping's in tomorrow. What? Like, come on. Anyway, he wants to come back, and he's not against fighting T.J. Dillashaw. And look, there's some storyline, there's some pro wrestling, there's father, son, teacher, student, there's some griminess because now Faber's saying, not surprised, mother, about the whole, the whole popping thing. So
yeah.
I know it doesn't get you excited. I know you don't care in your eyes.
It can't happen until 2020.
Prime pound for pound guy against
no, it's a little different. It's a little I mean, well, let's see where things are with TJ when this whole episode blows over.
Can Faber, by the way, there's career bridesmaids. There's always that conversation. Who's the best fighter in the UFC that's never won a title? Was Bisping for a while? It's either Dan Henderson or Joseph Benavidez right now. Yeah. Can Mr. Faber, as Northcote would call him, have a Bisping-like end to his career?
That'd be interesting. Probably not, but...
Okay, thank you. But that's all I got. All right, WrestleMania 35 next Sunday. Go ahead.
So there you go. Under the radar for me, two quick items. Number one, a good friend of mine and a former training partner, Suni Imhotep. That's his real name. He is going to be making his Bellator debut tomorrow. So I'm actually really excited for him. I just want to make a note about that. He's a guy who's been grinding for a long time and was looking for the right opportunity and finally got one. So he makes his Bellator debut tomorrow.
Is it on the undercard or the after?
It's on the prelim card, but it's a Bellator contract. Okay. So it's not one of these like, a lot of times they'll do like a co-promotion with like Shamrock FC. It's a real thing. And you'll see a Shamrock FC fighter with Bellator gloves. He got a Bellator contract. So, I mean, we'll see. He has to win. We'll see how things go.
You've seen some of those Bellator after fights. Like the guy who drives the Uber to the arena will fight and then drives home.
In fact, I think he has the first fight on the whole card.
All right.
I think it's the first fight on the whole card. So I wanted to wish him good luck. He doesn't need it, but I've known Suni for a long time. So it really makes me happy to see his career advance. And then beyond that, though, Bloody Elbow had a great article this week. Go check it out. Doctors have developed what they think is an early test. Now, there's a lot of different moving parts here. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, but they believe they have a blood test that could help potentially detect traumatic brain injury. Now, that's a long way away from implementation ubiquitously in combat sports. There's a lot of different levels of additional testing needed to really refine the instrument of it. But that could be a game changer. You can well imagine where, they can do an eye test or a saliva test or now a blood test, and they can maybe figure out to what extent your brain has been rattled. All these kinds of things are, I think, advancement in the right direction. So
will that kill the excitement in the sport? Over time?
Here is what I think might happen, and this is where we have to sort of come to grips with things. We have to have a better sense of what risks we are willing to take and what risks we are not. And right now, I don't feel like we get the balance right, in particular with drugs. What I think would be a better way to go about things is, this is my personal view, changing the view on drugs a little bit. But it would have to be married with some kind of rigorous brain scan, where I think what's eventually going to happen is, and I am merely speculating, of course, but eventually we're going to find that we can detect and understand damage in the brain enough to say where like a cholesterol, if it's above a certain level, it's simply too high. Where if your brain damage, for lack of a better description, is above a certain level, you cannot get licensed to compete. And I think what's going to end up doing is just ending careers a lot earlier than we're ready for.
Well, and my reaction to that is then will that change the game because people are trying to protect their brain and not go for it. Just like in football where you've had to change rules that it's increased scoring to keep people from getting ridiculous concussions, will fighting eventually be more of a point-based system because people are trying to prevent
Right, but then promoters might react by paying guys like Gaethje even more to be who they are. There's all kinds of different ways in which we can judge this. We'll have to see how things go, but I just think understanding what brain damage is, what it looks like, how to slow it, how to combat it, how to stop it, how to diagnose it, these are all steps in the right direction. So, all right, that's it for us. Now, here's what we're going to do. We've been taking your tweets using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. We're going to do a segment we call After the Beat. Always remember, the After the Beat segment now is a YouTube exclusive. So we're still going to do it. We're just going to keep it strictly on the old YouTubes, okay? So don't go anywhere. After the Beat starts right now. All right, there we are. After the Beat, we are back. YouTube exclusive. Luke Thomas here, host of the program. Brian Campbell, Iceman, Chuck Mindenhall, the man in the hat. We are back. We have taken them tweets of yours using the hashtag #TheMMABeat. I have to tell you, I have been a little bit underwhelmed with the tweets the last couple of weeks for two different reasons. I mentioned this before. Of course, I appreciate everyone's submission, but on the one hand, and I can't breathe, so I got to take my Afrin out. I have a nasal appointment for surgery next week, so we'll see how it goes. But they often repeat things, or like they cover stuff that we're going to get to. It's like, what'd you guys make of the Conor McGregor situation? It's like, well, probably
we need Jed going, what do you guys think of BJ Penn versus Uriah Faber? And then we'd be like, oh my
right,
God,
it's a little different. Or it's just like totally inane. Like someone was like, what's your favorite meat to eat? And I'm like, I'm not sure whether there's a there. All right? But I've picked the best ones. We appreciate all the submissions. Keep sending them using the hashtag the MMA Beat. Let's get this going. All right, Brian. Do you think the upcoming One Championship card is the biggest in the promotion's history? What are your favorite memories from one?
Hey.
Favorite memories,
top
like
10,
it's some kind of storied experience.
You need to narrow it down. So top 10 moments.
When they signed Sexayama and I popped.
This is sort of like asking what are your favorite memories from sitting at a red light?
Look,
like,
I'm really excited for one. I had Eddie Demetrius Sage on my podcast. I've been talking about one a lot. I did not know Eddie Alvarez was fighting this weekend, even though I interviewed him 2.5 weeks ago, until this morning.
You know, we always have the most plugged-in media members here.
No, and I don't know how that happened. I don't know how that happened.
There's
but
too
happened,
much MMA is the problem.
And that's a problem. So am I excited? Is this their biggest card? No and maybe. And what's my favorite one moment? I don't know. I like the Metallica video. I don't really have one moment, all right?
I mean, I don't have one. Go ahead.
No, I certainly don't have one.
This is clearly the biggest.
Oh, that time Askren got poked in the eye.
No, it's pretty clearly their biggest
I was like,
card.
I mean, what could come close? I mean, the Askren fights, I used to tune in for those. There's been very few in the States that you're going to care enough about to stay up in the weird hours and to watch them. But in terms of that, yes, I think this is the biggest one. You know, I mean, it's even been compelling to see Demetrius Johnson with the one logo insignia or whatever behind him and operating with whole different, you know, different operators and everything else with different handlers. Very strange to watch, but it's kind of cool, man. And yeah, I don't know. I almost have to reserve judgment until you watch the whole product and then get a better sense of it. But to me, this one has by far the biggest buzz.
So this will be streaming live, correct?
Only on BR Live in the United States. You got to pay for this.
It's an app. Oh, you have to pay.
Oh, yeah, it's a streaming service.
hey.
Now, they might have the same bit where you can sign up and then cancel again, but you have to pay for this one.
So many services.
Yeah, I mean, newsflash, I'm not paying for that. But here's the thing. It's clearly their biggest event, at least from a Western perspective, probably from their own perspective, too. Remember, John Nash did an article on Bloody Elbow where he got access to their financial documents, and they were not even close to making any of the kind of money that they claim. However, what is also true is they ended up getting nearly $200 million verified in venture capital funding. Then they made all those signings, not merely on the talent side. Remember, they hired Misha Tate to be VP.
Right.
They did this huge tour. This is the first event building off of that. Now, they've always had a lot of their own Asian resources. Shinya Aoki's on this card. A number of other players are on this card who have been. Edward Fuliang is on this card. They are building off of that, and then they're debuting some of these shiny new toys that they got. So to me, it's like pretty clearly from that perspective, it's the first one on this new streaming service. So yeah, it's the biggest. It's just I don't know what to make of one. It's like I have total respect for Matt Hume, Rich Franklin, Misha Tate. I find Chatrik Sityodtong to be a very smart guy, but I think he dodges tough interviews. I'll just be candid about that. I think he kind of goes to places where people don't ask a lot of questions about their finances or about their weight cutting.
Or about promoting Roy Jones against Vitor Belfort.
Well, he answered that. So they clearly have something going on. It's just always hard to tell exactly what the truth is. So the card looks pretty good. It looks pretty good. You're going to get to see maybe the best fighter in the universe go compete, but you are going to have to pay for it if you're in the United States. Now, I think overseas it's a little bit different.
This weekend, are you more apt to watch that or that triangular cage backyard brawl thing that Dad of 5000 is commenting on?
I had no idea that was a real thing.
Oh,
that's a real thing?
Yeah, it's bare knuckle combat inside a triangle cage, and it's.
Well, they're not trying to give you any room. Just. I would probably watch one more than that, but I honestly I can't sign up for another streaming service. I'm not even trying to be flippant about it.
I can't cross any more of those.
It's like, dude, and they do show some NBA games on there, but you have to get like another tier inside the package, and then the other things that they show, it's like I think they show some Champions League. Okay, that's cool. I like that, but then it's like lacrosse. It's like your value add proposition for me at this point is not strong.
At least the zone you can get some Canelo, you know?
And you get Chilean soccer. Yay.
Oh, wow.
All right, next. I'm a big fan of Dom Cruz's commentary because of his analytical and inside knowledge when it comes to fighting. Which current UFC fighter not already employed as a commentator could you see as a great commentator? Chuck Mindenhall. By the way, in defense of Dom Cruz, I've seen a lot of people be like, his style is boring. It's like, yeah, but here's the thing. He says true and interesting things. I don't like, I'm not relying on Dom Cruz's jocularity to get me through a broadcast. I want to be informed, and I think he does that better than just about anybody.
I mean, it actually it's a benefit to have him be as kind of serious-minded as he is, because the other guys can then be the comical side of that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think if anybody just stands out. I know I have talked, and you've probably talked to more guys because you've talked to them more analytically about fighting.
Yep.
But nobody really springs to mind.
Well, they said current fighters, so no Conor McGregor. Because while that's a joke,
Put the tweet up one more time.
Well, that's a joke. Wouldn't you think his personality would be phenomenal?
No, I think he'd be terrible for it.
Really?
Can I see the tweet one more time, if you guys don't mind?
Because let's take a Roy Jones in boxing. It took him a while, but he became fantastic at it, despite being a little too cocky.
Here he goes. Which current UFC fighter? Yeah, current UFC fighter not already employed as a commentator.
Toughie.
Well, first of all, I would say Tyron Woodley.
Yeah.
Tyron Woodley's a great. Tyron Woodley was one of the best desk analysts that they have.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how that would translate necessarily to the commentary booth.
I agree.
What about Ben Askren? Think he'd be able to do it?
I don't know. Here's the problem with Ben, because Ben is clearly smart and clearly analytical. Ben, if you're watching this, I bought your BJJ Fanatics wrestling DVDs, and I went through all of them. This is actually did over the last week. I watched his entire. It's like a 10-volume series, or nearly. I watched all of them. So he is.
Nerd alert.
I know. What am I doing with my life? But in any event, he is clearly gifted. But I just wonder if he might get off like on the wrong foot, being like, if there's a welterweight fight, be like, look at these two bums. Or if there's a wrestling exchange, like these two guys honestly cannot wrestle.
Well,
he might get into that kind of thing. You know?
Do you think there's room for that sort of entertainment in the booth, or does the booth have to be serious and technical?
You know, that's a great question, because here was the thing about that. So, do you guys remember when Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series in the first season, they had Faber and Snoop Dogg doing their whatever they called it?
That's extreme, just like Dennis Miller.
Okay, that is extreme, but what I wound up, the fighters I saw, none of them got mad at Faber, but a lot of them got really mad at Snoop for basically doing what I would describe as talking like a fan. That is how fans talk. If you go to a bar, if you go to a sporting event, and you hear fans talk about a guy getting knocked out, oh, he got knocked out, you know, blah, 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 blah. They're not saying the nicest things. It was probably uncomfortable to hear, but it wasn't unrepresentative of how the wider fan base talks about it. Now, the NBA has gone in a different direction, which is like players only. So the answer is, I do think there's more room for jocularity, and I think DC does the best job of combining jocularity and great insight. But I wonder if you got more outside of that, if the fans might rebel.
Jocularity is good, but irreverence and just mockery and things like that. If you get to those levels, I'm like, then it becomes something.
People got mad at Bisping on the Fox desk when he would trash talk a little with the fighters.
Yeah.
I loved it. It's entertainment.
Yeah. So for me, I think it really depends. I don't need that kind of stuff. I'm not going to say there's no room for it. I guess it really just depend on how someone navigated it. You know, I think the problem would end if you end up doing one and you neglect the other duties. Or if you end up doing one and you're good at it but not good enough to justify neglecting the other duties, like there's a lot of ways it could go wrong. So the answer is let's see who can craft that kind of space.
I wish Randy Couture was still working for the UFC. I know he's still calling fights, but
PFL,
I still think he's the best fighter analyst, maybe outside of a rising Dom Cruz right now. But
so to answer the question, like who's not been employed, the answer is I don't know, but I wonder if there's a female commentator who's not hired.
I was trying to think of one. You know, it's funny.
Julie Kedzie, obviously, is out there.
Yeah. Guys like Dan Hardy and, Paul Felder, for instance, they found both these guys. And I'm not sure. I mean, you probably talked to these guys. I don't know if you've talked to them before they got their gigs, but you knew that they were very smart.
Yep.
They were very articulate kinds of people. They'd done many different kinds of artistic pursuits that had nothing to do with MMA. MMA just happened to be where we discovered them, but Felder was like a thespian on the stage, and Hardy had done all kinds of stuff in the arts, like photography and everything else. I feel like those types of things, I don't know everybody's background, but I feel like those types of elements, when you have a bigger worldview, feed into, like something like that. You have to be able to employ a lot of different things and make yourself knowledgeable, not just the sport, but kind of the fan base, what they're thinking, everything. Yeah. It's not as easy as it seems. No. So those guys to seamlessly going in and do it is a big boon for the UFC. But I'm sure there are guys like that. But it's just tough to know when you talk to them as fighters. You know what I mean? As you talk to them as fighters, to really see that side of them, because they got to be a little bit.
And a lot of them don't. For example, I had Eugene Behrman on my radio show. He is the coach at City Boxing in New Zealand. So he's the coach of Adesanya and stuff. So he he likes me and I like Eugene. This is in no way disparaging. But he actually told fighters who are coming on my show, he's like, careful, this guy's going to ask you about technique. Don't give any of our secrets away. He told me that on the air, so I'm not saying anything he didn't reveal. But he was like, I scouted you. You asked questions. So there's another part where even if you talk to them, they'll purposely hide it away.
Right.
Whereas if you get them in private, they might rattle it off. I had Anthony Pettis on my radio show earlier this week, and we spent 6 minutes talking about technique. I didn't know he had it in him like that. I was blown away by how good he was. Because I think a lot of times these guys just suppress it. So it's hard to know.
To answer the spirit of that question real quick, I think Chris Weidman could become a sleeper because he was just a really bad interview when he initially won the championship. He was just sort of didn't have a lot to say. And if you've interviewed him in the past year when he's coming off of losses, he's more personal, introspective. I think that could be a potential guy who could really sort of break things down.
He has that nice combo of lean in, engaged on the material, but kind of likes to have a little fun. I mean, this is the guy who picks his nose on TV with John Vellante. You know what I mean? Like, they like to have a little fun.
Where he used to just be dude. He was just
That's
a
right.
dude.
Before he was like, that's the guy that beat Anderson Silva? There was like, people were incensed because like this person, and then they got to know him, and I think that changed a little bit. Next. All right, table. Why does heavyweight rarely have any young champions? Every champion seems to be 34 years or plus.
That's a good point.
What do you think, guys?
Well, you know, you got to lose in this sport a lot to get good at it. But this question is specifically heavyweight.
Heavyweight, yeah. It's got to be that a lot of these guys are recruited to go elsewhere, and then a lot of them decide. Like, for example, I had the NBA player whose name now escapes me. The one who
Royce White.
Yeah, Royce White.
Or Royce White, right, for you Brazilians.
If you're Brazilians, yes. I had him on my show a couple of weeks ago, and he had this sort of similar story, like the NBA thing. He made it there, and he's athletic, and it didn't work out. And then he walked into Greg Nelson's gym, and there you go.
And that's the same thing in American boxing right now. You don't.
Remember Seth Mitchell from Michigan State?
Exactly. Look at Deontay Wilder right now. He was a failed football and basketball player who wanted to play football at Alabama and took up boxing at 19. When you're a heavyweight and you're American, you're taking it. You're not growing up in this business. You're becoming.
There's very few guys who are like 19, 20 years old that are big, already big and into their bodies like that are fighting. I don't know why that is. Even when you go watch kind of regional shows, there aren't a lot of young heavyweights for whatever reason. So I don't know why.
Yeah, because as Bert Sugar used to say, you want to see the best American heavyweight boxers, they're playing linebacker for the Ravens. Because you're going to be pushed into a team sport where there's potential to make more money without as much damage. Because there's still that mindset in fighting, especially if you're a parent of a young child. I know things are changing with MMA becoming, across the board universal, but it's still that mindset of, well, why am I going to send my son into the fight game when he could go play soccer?
The other interesting part about this is, you guys probably didn't see this news, but weightlifting, remember when wrestling in the Olympics was nearly excommunicated and they had to make a bunch of changes and they got let back in? Weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting had a similar problem, but with drug use. You want to talk about one of the sports that is just infested with drug use. It is Olympic weightlifting. So they were nearly axed from the Olympics, but the big announcement this week was that they got put into the 2024 Olympics. Anyway, point being is, if you look at the very best heavyweight and super heavyweight lifters, they're all from overseas. And you're like, why would the Georgians and the Iranians have the best lifters? Well, in part because those are bigger sports there. But what else are their heavyweight athletes going to do? They don't have a basketball program of note.
Yeah, they're not playing soccer.
They're not playing soccer. They're not going to play, obviously, American football. Yeah. They're going to get recruited for the things that those guys do. So it's like partly our best athletes aren't doing it. Partly we don't have the same kind of program that some of these other countries do. But when you see like 22-year-old Russian heavyweights, it's like, oh, right, because they're not getting siphoned off in the way we are here.
Yeah. I think there's something to that. I was trying to think of anybody, but Francis Ngannou, I believe, was like one of the few guys who was like a big prospect that was still in his 20s, right? Like that was part of the reason he had a novelty to him, was that he was younger than and John Jones. I think that there's a big thing like for him to kind of graduate up to this level, because he would be like an infusion of youth.
Okay, but John Jones is the best example.
Exactly.
He is a light heavyweight, and he did what he did. His two brothers played in the NFL, and they were heavyweights, Arthur and Chandler.
Well, John's like the failed athlete, oddball brother who was lost in his late teens.
Not the failed athlete. That's not true.
But still sort of like...
He wasn't cut out for American football, but he's not a failed athlete.
Because of the skinny legs.
He's actually one of the best athletes in the UFC.
Failed athlete means... in this case, means failed team sport athlete.
Yes, that's true.
Where you have a path to college and you hope to
Yes. Okay, next. All right, boys. Which MMA fighter that you've interviewed or met do you think has the coolest life? outside of their fighting.
Jeez.
Now, that's an interesting one. I'll be candid. I usually don't covet the lives of fighters, in part because, yes, they have wealth, but, dude, they're in the gym constantly. Yeah. They're dealing with injuries constantly. They're dealing with public scrutiny constantly. Man. So you might be able to, like, twist it to, like, which retired fighter or which, like, you know, that kind of a thing. I would say St. Pierre's got a pretty great life.
Yeah.
I like his life a lot.
Yeah.
He's got some money. He's chill. He's got good friends. That seems all right.
A spot at the bar, carved out for him.
But like, for example, would I really want Mayweather's life? It's like I wouldn't mind having Mayweather's money,
right?
But I don't want his life.
Well, we're also talking about the fight game where honestly very few people come out unscathed. Where you know, I always use Sugar Ray Leonard as examples. Good-looking guy, still talks really well, still broadcasting. Yet he even fought through a lot of depression and alcohol abuse afterwards. The fight game is really not set up for great endings.
No, it's not
in that regard. And lives are usually crazy on the outside as well.
I know fans envy their lives. I'm like, yes, you would want their money, and fame can be fun.
Well, you'd want to be a badass too. There's chicks.
Okay, fine, but there's lots of ways to be a badass. It's like, I don't know, man.
What's his name? Gregor Gillespie?
Gregor Gillespie. King of fishing.
So there you go. Like a guy like that who basically has a whole different passion. Like those guys are always really interesting, right? Like he's always out there in his fun places, his safe place, like out there fishing. That's not a bad
Tim
life.
Kennedy's got an interesting life.
Yeah, exactly.
Again, all parts of it I don't know, but he's got a lot of other parts that are pretty interesting. You know who's got a great life is former MMA coach and still a black belt, the Guerrilla Jiu-Jitsu founder, Dave Camarillo.
Yeah.
He travels the world teaching jiu-jitsu.
What about Luke Rockhold? I mean, the guy's like a model on the side.
But then the answer.
Yeah, but then he has to
flying around, going to the Super Bowl.
That's the answer. You nailed it.
Okay, but he's got to live in Florida. Ugh.
Well, you still live in California, but maybe he still wants to.
Cormier's got a pretty cool life because he's still a dad and a coach, you know, but he makes good money and he's got some fame and.
If I could pick one man from 1 year, I'd pick 2013 TRT Belfort. That's the greatest superhero in fighting history. I would be that guy that year.
You overstate things a little.
I mean, just wear a mohawk and just spin wheel, kick people, knock them out cold. You'd be a hero.
In the cage. What did he do outside?
Rosie Sexton ended up having a career in academia. I don't know how cool that is, but I certainly envy that to a degree.
Yeah.
Who else is out there that has got a pretty interesting... who's the guy who retired early, the Ninja of Love? Remember his name? Remember him? He retired from like brain concerns. God, he pursued a medical degree.
You don't mean Dustin Hazlett, right?
Honestly, if I could be tenured in some university teaching MMA studies, that would be like perfect for me. That's all I would want. I would want nothing more.
Brian Stan always had a very, very rich life outside of fighting, I felt like, and even to this day.
Okay, but I'm not here to besmirch it, but the question was cool. Now, to me.
Well, cool, yes, cool. I mean,
so
he's
to me,
like James Bond.
Yeah, exactly. To me, he's a father, he's got a kids. He is the American, like, he's Captain America for me. How cool that is, you know.
I guess Conor's got strictly cool. I remember this is I remember visiting Josh Koscheck for a piece for Fight Magazine, and
was this when he had the plane?
This was in Fresno. I don't know if he had a plane, but he had a Ferrari, and he had a huge place, and he was showing me around. And what's the guy's name? Dwayne Zinkin.
Yeah.
He was right there with him, and they're both driving their Ferraris around. And I was like, they were like the kings of Fresno. Now Fresno being what it is, but I was like, this is crazy. You live in this little town, but you kind of are like a god in Fresno. You know what I mean? Yeah. I remember seeing his pool and all the things he had going on.
Cowboy Cerrone basically rides around
in
a
that's a good
motorhome drinking beer and water skiing and getting into fights with civilians.
Nothing wrong with that. That's a good way to live.
Wakeboarding, buying. He's always doing crazy.
So yeah, there's some answers, but like in the end, I've always said this. I have total admiration for fighters. I've built my life around them. But I would not, even if I had the ability, I don't know that I would want to be one. And I don't have the choice because I can't be. But it's not for everybody. And I'm pretty sure it's not for me. So, next. Today is opening day. And I've always argued hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in sports. What do you think is the most difficult thing to do in all of sports? So Europeans might have a different perspective. But in American sports, they say the hardest thing to do is hit 300. So out of every 10 at-bats,
I watched some sports science thing about the amount of reaction time a major league hitter would actually have to pick up the ball and try to figure out what pitch it is and make a decision.
When was the last time you were in a batting cage? I went one not too long ago, and they were just throwing 55.
I know,
which is nothing. No, 65, and which is nothing. I mean, 65 is like a knuckleball in American baseball, and I couldn't believe how fast it was.
It's ridiculous.
I still think hitting a baseball at 300 is pretty hard. Man.
That is very difficult. The one thing that's very, it's like you don't know how you would react. I always feel like getting punched in your face is really the hardest thing, because you don't know how you react. There's certain people who realize it very difficult. They break a bone in their face or something happens to them in a fight, and they have to understand on the fly if they have it in them.
Brock Lesnar.
To go past that. Which seems to me like this self-discovery that's playing out in real time, which is a very strange thing that I love about fighting. And you're right. Like guys like Brock Lesnar, I remember Brandon Vera back in the day being like, he doesn't want to get hit. This was before anybody was saying that. He's like, he doesn't want to get hit.
That. Pre-Twitter, you could have broke that.
Yeah. But I just remember, but all that stuff to me it's like keeping your adrenaline from dumping in a situation like that, not going crazy, keep your emotions in check and knowing how you're going to react to things like that's very difficult. But if you're talking about sports like that, that's probably right. I think when you look at the major sports, I would say that's probably true, because we never go beyond it. We marvel at people who hit anywhere from 350 to 400. It's only happened. The 400 hitter obviously is like,
it's incredibly rare.
Yeah, it's ridiculously rare. So I would say that's probably it.
I marvel at the stamina of things, not just like a marathon runner, but the stamina of a fighter who fights 5-round championship fight, or a boxer that fights a 36-minute championship fight. How do you have that kind of stamina to deal with the pain, to deal with, like, that's just insane.
Yeah. I guess for me, I still think playing American quarterback at the highest level.
Isn't it crazy? That's crazy.
32 teams, and they can't find 20 good quarterbacks in all of the country, and they are searching and grooming and training and teaching, and they can't. Are there 20 good? There's like 15 okay quarterbacks, and there's like 5 good ones, and there's 10 like decent ones, and that's about it, man.
Yeah.
That is a hard position to play. So that would be one.
To diagnose all the routes.
Yes.
Put the timing on the ball and with a pocket collapsing, and then improvise when needed in that situation, and to keep doing it. It's just
and then
crazy.
at the line of scrimmage to read, make an adjustment. It's like
the audibles and everything.
Dude,
else.
it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So that I'd say is tough. I obviously I don't know how hard it is. I mean, it's pretty hard, but I always have deep admiration for strength athletes, but that's a different scenario. All right, next. Out of all the cities you guys visit for UFC events, what are your favorite places to grab a bite to eat?
Ooh. Man.
Everywhere in Los Angeles,
Los Angeles has very good food.
Los Angeles is the best food city ever.
You're out of your mind.
Ever.
It's not as good as New York City. You're so high.
Well, I grew up.
Food trucks out there. Huh?
I mean, I'm constantly in New York.
Well, here's the thing.
I've grown up outside of New York. I love New York food, but high-end New York food is amazing. Every end LA food is absolutely.
I just think that they're better at different things. So, for example, Mexican food in New York City is not as good as LA food, not even close. However, I would say something like Italian food here smokes Italian food in LA. Something like that. Sushi's probably better here. High-end sushi, anyway.
I just say that I lived in Los Angeles for a long time. I worked at the LA Weekly, where Jonathan Gold is a Pulitzer Prize winner on food, which is,
that's tough to
something.
do. Yeah.
And his ability to uncover in Los Angeles so many of these places that are just like, going Inland Empire, just these places within little Korea and things. There is so much out there that you can't, it's very similar. It's almost like you can't compare the two.
Yeah, but imagine
you can only compare them that there's such a vastness of good food. There's so much good food if you just know where to look.
But I'm saying, if you had access to Pete Wells from the New York Times, he's a famous food critic.
True.
And he took you around New York, you might be surprised.
Oh, if you go to Queens,
100%,
that area in Queens where every block is a different country, every corner, it just.
And I've had some really good stuff out in that area.
I just think that they're better at different things.
Yeah. If you're talking about cities that are not like these huge
Houston is good. I had awesome food in Houston.
Good,
Houston is good. Montreal is always very good.
Montreal's good.
Montreal is the answer for non-giant cities.
Yeah.
Montreal's food.
Montreal is just a fantastic.
Let me get in that poutine, right?
Yeah. Poutine's a little overrated. It's a little overrated. But Montreal's tremendous. Florida can just,
No, it's the worst food in Florida. The worst.
Everyone's like,
what about that claim jumper down there?
Everyone's like, the Cuban food in Miami. You can get better Cuban food somewhere else, man.
I mean,
UFC never goes to Miami, so it's kind of.
Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Any big city, Texas, you're going to get great barbecue. You're going to get that sort of.
Yeah,
side
Austin. I didn't go there, but I mean, obviously, like for the UFC, but I've been there, and that's an amazing place for food.
Yeah, I went to Austin. I didn't go there for work, but I did go for work, but not for UFC, and that was pretty amazing. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I had gone to. Anything smaller city.
Chicken and waffles in Atlanta.
You know who's got good food? And actually, it was funny, Daniel Cormier mentioned on the broadcast, Nashville. Nashville has good food. Nashville's got really good food. I was surprised. You know what Atlanta's got? Not good food. I know because I went to high school there. Not good food. Everyone's like, what about the soul food? Some of the soul food there is pretty good, obviously. But as a general like food city,
I'll say one. Charlotte. Charlotte is a hit.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've never had a bad meal down there. Everything. And I mean, I know guys down there who know where to go, but we're always going to different places, and all of it is good.
When's UFC going to come to New Haven?
And by the way, people ask this question, so let me ask it to you guys. How would you describe the food in Las Vegas? Okay, here's what I would say. If you're on the Strip, the high-end places.
Oh, the
are
high
just
end
fine.
is immaculate. When
But
somebody's
like,
got that
pride
good,
themselves on their big chef, refs.
And there are some places outside. There are some places outside of the Strip. Casey and Esther took me to a Japanese place off the Strip that in Vegas that was tremendous. But generally, it's like I don't know how I would describe the food in Las Vegas. I mean, Las Vegas is like
there's no character.
It's Dave and Buster's. I mean, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. It's Dave and Buster's.
Without Michael Chandler in the commercial.
Yeah, right. They do have some good eats there for sure.
Oh yeah.
It's not a walkable. See, here's the thing. I think this is one of the reasons why LA is a little bit different. But like a lot of times, like it's why European cities like this, you can just walk around them and you can find good food, and you're just on foot the whole time. That's why like my favorite country for food is Spain. Because, bro, you just hop on foot and you can just walk into a million little spots.
And that's what's great, those the kind of surrounding ambiance, the surrounding context of where you're at. What's crazy about Vegas is obviously each one of those places is in some kind of greater hotel, casino situation. So you can't escape kind of the faux weirdness of that.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, wow, this burrito is really good at this Mexican place I'm eating at the MGM Grand. Oh, look. Here comes some drunken bridesmaids. Half of them are missing shoes, and now they're fist fighting. It's like, I don't know, man.
Look, she's holding her hair while she
kind of ruins the meal. Yeah. All right, next. Will there ever come a day when you and the panel, two ends, look back and say, "Man, I really miss talking about Conor McGregor"?
Whoa.
I thought about this.
Man.
I think the answer is yes. If there's like a day where there's nothing to talk about.
Depends on how he ends.
Yeah. What I don't want there to be is a sad ending, right, to the story. So that would be one thing. But I suspect that, like, there will come a time where you're like, man, remember all that time we talked about Conor? Like,
we'll just be talking about PEDs instead. It'll just fill the hole.
who would they calling me?
Grab that, will you?
No, I answered. Right. I should have answered it on the air.
Got to take this, fellas.
You suck, Dad. Is that you? Click. I don't know.
I could see a situation. Let's just say that his retirement was real right now. He just kind of disappears. It's not going to happen. He's not going to ever disappear from the spotlight. So that's one thing. He's always going to be in the spotlight. He's got a whiskey company. He's always going to be in the ads. He's always going to be doing this stuff. So I feel like he'll still be ubiquitous enough within our culture for us not to be missing him.
Right.
But within the fight game, if this was really it, if you really walked away in a couple of years and for some reason we're plateauing and we can never dredge up that next star, I'm sure you would probably at some point be like, man, remember the good old days when Conor McGregor would have a fight and every outlet would fly to that city to go watch him fight? And we talk about him, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
For once, you have no words? For once? Wow. So what do we owe this on?
Hot dog.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. Keep sending those tweets using the hashtag the MMA Beat. There's a lot going on. Enjoy one if you're going to watch it this weekend. Obviously, UFC Philadelphia, which, by the way, the main card kicks off at 7 p.m.
Glorious.
Oh, strawweights, Carolina versus Watterson.
Yeah, there's a bunch of good fights in that card. Sabina Mazo, actually, in honor of Dani Segura, the Colombian queen. She will make her UFC debut on that card.
Yusuf has been the next guy to probably watch for the African-born guys who've coming up.
Yusuf Sadiq.
Yeah, Sadiq.
Yeah.
He's one guy to keep an eye on too, because he's a featherweight, but I think he's got some.
There's a bunch of good fights on that card, so be sure to tune in for that. So thank you guys so much for watching. We really appreciate it. We are back next week, and until then, for Chuck, for Brian, Danny in absentia, I'm Luke, Phoenix, I guess as well. Hands up, chin down, let them fly. This is the MMA Beat.